Welcome to another edition of Futurartist Records Presents. I'm Michael Hartsock, and today my guest is a voice teacher and performer, and he's dropped in to talk about the expansive subject of the voice. Please welcome Dr. Cody Laun. Cody, thanks for coming in today.
Absolutely, my pleasure.
We talked in our pre-interview for hours and hours, and I realized when we started outlining this, we're barely going to scratch the surface. So we're going to have to drag you back in and go into more depth on this stuff. But the voice is an incredible thing. There's lots of different aspects to it. Before we start going into some of those things, why don't you give us some background on who you are and what your knowledge is on this subject?
Sure. So I graduated in 2010 with my Bachelor of Music in Vocal Performance from Colorado State. 2012 with my Master's in Performance from University of Florida, and just successfully defended my dissertation, graduating with my Doctorate of Musical Arts in Performance and Pedagogy from the University of Southern Mississippi. I've been teaching. I had a studio there in my doctoral program for 3 years. I was visiting professor of voice in 2015-16 at Colorado State, gigging and teaching at Front Range in Fort Collins the next year, and then helped start a music certificate program at a small Christian liberal arts college in Idaho last year, as well as teaching voice, theory, history, the whole gamut. So, and I've been performing with regional opera companies for the last, is it 2018? Is that what it is?
Yes.
So 6-7 years I've had both regional opera performance and a lot of professional ensemble experience as well.
Awesome. You've been all over the country. I didn't realize that.
Yeah.
Wow.
I've lived in every time zone.
Yeah.
And taught, I think, in every time zone.
That's cool. So now that we've quantified your knowledge on this, and you definitely have some experience behind you, how does your singing affect your teaching and vice versa?
When I am practicing actively the way that I should to be keeping my voice in what we'll call, I mean, in any field they talk about being in fighting shape,
right.
And we have the same thing in voice, where you could be asked to do something, a significant gig, and go without too much fear and trepidation, go into that gig with some notice, but to keep that in fighting shape, you're in a fitness regimen for your voice, for your body, health regimen, a number of different things, and so you are always refining and exploring the ins and outs of what you're doing with your voice. So as you're exploring those things and discovering new things, discovering how they plug into your system, then your teaching, you can bring those things into the studio. And then there are times when I'm teaching, last year I had 23 private voice students at the college in Idaho, and I was consistently reminding myself of things as I was teaching. There would be some issue a student was dealing with, and we'd explore a few options to address it. And I'd think, I need to teach myself a lesson. I need to go in my practice with this same thing. So as you always go into it with an attitude of humility and learning that way, and being able to be a lifelong learner. So if you're singing, your teaching can come in and bolster that, and then and vice versa. You're always able to draw from experience in both places.
Do you ever do as I say, not as I do?
Hopefully not, but there are definitely some things that I think I'm telling them to do it this way, and I'm not doing it that way.
Right. Yeah.
But once you at a certain point, you can break your own rules. Sort of. We always talk about composers that you've got to do it this way as you're learning in a music theory class.
Right.
Well, they didn't do that. Yeah, but they were also. So that's,
learn the rules so you can break them later.
Exactly. Yeah. I don't know if I have quite that much clout yet, but.
So you talked about vocal health and physical health. What do you do for that, and what does that mean?
Well, every person is different. Obviously, if you have food allergies or reflux or something that is a health issue for you, you need to address that. Generally, hydration and rest and a balanced diet and some form of exercise. Doesn't have to be that you're getting to be an amateur bodybuilder or something, but swimming, yoga, things like that keep your body strong and limber. We want that flexible strength in singing. So. But there are also people that I've known that can go 3 days with a glass of water during that whole 3 days and sound angelic, and then people who, if they're not overhydrating,
Right.
can barely get it out. So it just depends on your body, but generally use the common sense that hopefully most people are going to have about it. Just if you feel good, you're probably going to sound good.
Are you able to guide people in that process, knowing kind of what their diet is and stuff, and say, hey, look, I know that you drink 3 pots of coffee a day. We should probably trim that back a little bit because I'm hearing it in your voice. You're able to hear that from one practice thing?
Because I have a number of chronic health issues myself that have been improving over the last many years. But I have asthma and I have a number of food allergies, and I have what's called a hiatal hernia, which is a hernia in the hiatus in your diaphragm where the esophagus comes through that can cause reflux. So I have that worked on, so it's not bothering me, and I know from my asthma and my allergies strategies to approach those, maybe not even those health issues, but chronic or ongoing health issues for people that I've been through a lot of it myself. So I can say, okay, we're doing everything technically right. You know, I can look at it and be reading their body and reading what they're doing and going, yeah, we're here, but the voice still sounds like what have you, a number of things. So from my own experience having some issues that I've had to be mindful of, I can move that into my teaching with those students as well. And I do yoga, and I think it's the best thing that's ever been invented. I think it's spectacular. And so I'll always advise my students, if you want better capability in all these areas, then do something like this. I can usually, anyways. So
So now with talking about that, is there a performance approach that's different that doesn't necessarily tie into the health approach? For instance, if you have asthma, if it's an issue where every time you take a breath you feel like you're going to cough or pass out, do you change your performance technique to overcome that?
There are some things you can do for sure. My own asthmatic issues, there's a number of fitness, both vocal and bodily, that I will employ and sort of use as a warm-up before I'd sing.
Gotcha.
That maybe would stretch some things out or calm the body down a little bit. So it depends. If you've got, I've had to do a couple of auditions that I had no idea what was going on when I had bad reflux once upon a time, where I went, okay, I know my body and my voice are capable of these things and not this. And so I could go in and say, all right, I'm only going to do what I know I'm capable of in this audition. And not hurt myself. So to a degree, yes, there are things you can do to kind of fix it at the front end, but then you have to listen to yourself and know, I can't do that.
Have you ever found that out the hard way?
Yep, absolutely.
Walk out going, wow, what did I do that for?
Yep, day 1 to day 2, legitimately, I'd had a lesson that was maybe one of the best voice lessons I'd ever taken in all my years of singing. And then the next day, I woke up and my voice had a cap, and I tried to do a performance with that cap, and I just splattered all over the place. I mean, it was not, and so I knew, okay, I know what this feeling is like now. I don't know what it is, but I know what I'm capable of in this scenario.
And how does that affect if you're going into a performance knowing that that's going to be an issue? How do you respond to that?
Sometimes you actually end up doing some of your best singing, because you have to rely on the technical foundation that you've built for yourself.
Sure.
Sometimes it gets the best of you and you get bad nerves and end up it's a small disaster in some ways. But I've done some of my best singing not at 100% for whatever reason, because I can't cheat. On anything.
You think you're
I have to just go
that
in.
Way too?
Yeah. Yes. And you do become more and more aware as you. I mean, I'm an asthmatic, so I'm aware of different things than other people would be, but through my performance experience, you do become increasingly aware of those little differences.
Right. You talked about building healthy people as well as healthy voices, and we've kind of touched on some of those things already. Do you incorporate all of those things when you teach? So you try to pull like the whole person, not just their voice, into it?
So one of the most powerful tools that we have as teachers is empathy. Not just my doctoral mentor that I studied with during that program taps into really specific physical empathy, where somebody will be singing and her body reacts to it, and so you can read it that way. And we all have some level of built-in empathetic response. So if a student comes in bright and cheery and open and ready to go, I can push that student until they break.
Gotcha.
If a student comes in totally shut down, I either have to draw them out or just meet them where they are in that lesson. I can't put the same stamp on every single student.
Right.
And so I try building a healthy voice and a healthy person. The voice is so mysterious because we can't see it. On an instrument, oh, that valve is broken on that trumpet. I need to replace this part. When your voice doesn't work, you don't know what it is right away.
Right.
And it's so personal because it's inside, it's me. It's
Right.
my voice. I can replace this horn, but I can't replace my voice. I can't take it out and
Right.
put a new one in.
Right.
And so building healthy people as well as healthy voices, they go hand in hand with how do I approach this voice as though it were its own person almost, and how do I see that person where they are.
Right.
And so I'm not just saying this is my agenda for you today and we're going to do it. These are the goals I'd like to achieve.
Right.
And how much do you have to give me? I will give you everything I have. And if you're at 30% that day, then I will give the amount that will raise you up rather than get too much weight on that.
Right. Right.
And destroy it.
Right. And we had talked about that during our first meeting, where meeting people where they are. How do you determine, okay, you can determine where they are. How do you determine where you would like them to be in comparison to where they would like to be, and then figure out the tools to get them to that place and to maybe convince them that it's okay to get to that place?
There are a number of ways that we can do that. One of them is if they have some specific performance or audition or something coming up and they said, I would like to sing this.
Right.
Okay, well, so let's quantify that a little bit. This is where you are, and this is where you would like to be. So how can we break down that distance into smaller distances?
Right.
So you have that goal for them. Okay, so you use the sort of external goals as you're going to be singing the show, and right now you'd sing 10 minutes of it and be exhausted. So how do we get you to that point? And then also, the more I teach, the more I sing, the more I interact with other teachers, you learn the very long distance view skills.
Right.
That I just had a new student on Thursday that she came in for the first 5 minutes and was just scared and shut down. And then within 20 minutes of teaching, she had opened up and her voice had grown, your heart grew 3 sizes that day.
Right.
Her voice just expanded. And I thought, okay, I can now, based on how far she came in that short distance, I can see, okay, she's capable of several more miles.
Right.
And I can see that. So you build those skills to know, based on their response and what they are capable of as a response to your teaching.
Right.
Sky's the limit on that. And then other students that aren't like that, but you build those skills by doing it more, seeing those long-term, in 10 years you might sound like this.
Right.
In 10 minutes,
Right.
you
right.
need to sound like this.
Right.
Or I would like to help you achieve that. And then you also help them be joyful about whatever goal they did achieve or didn't.
Right, yeah,
And
because
you help
it
them
helps them
celebrate.
get them to that next
Yeah.
step. Do you feel like, or do you ever have trouble discerning, is this my goal for them or is this their goal for them? Because say you have a student that comes in that has just unbelievable capabilities and possibilities, and so you see this enormous end goal for them, and maybe they're not on that page.
I always ask first, why are you here? And what is it about this that you love that makes you want to come into this room?
Right.
And so with that, I want to always keep there, because my training is in opera. That's what I do.
Right, right.
But not every student's going to want that. Not every student wants to be an opera singer. So I said, when I start with the disclaimer of, I'm not trying to turn you into an opera singer. This is not my goal. My goal is to make this joyful, healthy, and accessible for you.
Right.
And if I can do that, if I can provide you the tools to make whatever your goal is accessible and a healthy approach to it and a joyful process of it, then I can meet you at your goals. So my goal, I mean, I've got a student right now that had I gotten her, she's my age, we're the same age. And had I gotten her a few years ago, I'm like, yeah, I think we could have had her on a stage.
Wow.
But that's not what she wants to do.
Right.
She wants to be healthy. And so I have this theoretical, I told her, yeah, I think we really could have, had we gotten together a few years before, I think we could have done something really exciting, but I know that's not what you want to do now. I just want you to know that I want to encourage you towards whatever you want to do, I think you can do it. Right. And so here's your goal, here's what I think you're capable of, and I want that avenue to be fuel for what you want to do.
That can be difficult to communicate sometimes, I'm guessing.
Well, and to high school students. Too,
for sure,
all these high school students that are just
completely different thought process. Yeah.
And the biggest thing for them, they have goals of, hey, I wanna audition for all state choir.
Yeah.
Or I wanna do this audition for this musical we're doing at school. And I said, okay, I want you to get on stage and not be scared.
That's huge.
And they go, yes, that's it. I want to do that. That's
some of our goals still now.
Exactly. I still have that. And so I just try to. I always try to listen. Teachers are listeners. And empathizers. And so if I can listen to what their goals are, I can set my agenda aside most days and be along with them rather than. I always tell them my pushing muscles are tired. I want to pull you back.
Right.
I want you to go too far and have to pull you back from it. I don't want to just be pushing you towards something. So you run, I'll run alongside you.
Right.
And if you go too far, I'll pull you back.
Right.
But I don't want to be the one just pushing you into stuff. I want to give you the open door and give you the strength in your legs to walk through it.
Right. I'm starting to go completely off track here and diving into this. So I want to pull back a little bit and expand a little bit on what you had said earlier about what is a healthy voice? What is a healthy person?
A healthy voice is one that can. There are physical limitations to what any voice can do, but generally the healthy voice is you can sing for 2.5 hours a day and not be fatigued. Now that takes some time to get there, and it will get healthier. There are certain sound expectations we look for in healthy voice, but that also varies between styles. Right, a healthy operatic sound is not the same as a healthy music theater, as a healthy jazz, as a healthy gospel. There are different things, but there are qualities of the voice that do translate between all genres, and physical characteristics externally that translate between all genres. So those are the things that I teach into what my teacher and what I have adopted then as what we call baseline voice, is what does your voice sound like unaffected by style or register?
Interesting.
This is just your voice.
Yeah.
And so how can we make that sound be healthy, have longevity, and have sustainability over weeks, months, years?
Right.
So that's a healthy voice is one that is capable of, within certain bounds of vocal science. There are certain things that we just can and can't do, but within that, are you achieving? Are you tired after 15 minutes because something's wrong? Right. Somewhere. It may just be that it's out of shape. It may not be that you're doing anything wrong. I had some health issues going on the last few weeks that I'm not in the shape that I was about 6 weeks ago. Right. And so I did something this weekend that I went, oh, that would not have felt like that 6 weeks ago. That's okay. I know I'm not doing anything wrong. I know my voice is just a lot out of shape right now because of the sickness that I had experienced going into that. And so there are expectations, certainly. This is a long quote. Healthy voice, that's a long answer. Healthy person is one who is, I think, aware and willing and creative. You have to be aware of what's going on. If you're I know students that it's like telling them to be aware of their body at 16 makes them cringe. They're like, no, but things are happening to me and I don't understand them. And but making people aware of that, that's a healthy human to know I do have to get over my whatever you're uncomfortable with in that scenario, and willing to be wrong. Willing to step outside of whatever and wherever you are, and receive instruction. A person who is not teachable is not a healthy person. Right. And that's one of the biggest things. I'm a big teddy bear 95% of the time. But when a student is not teachable, that is the quickest way to shut me down. And that is the quickest way to shut a process down, is just being unwilling.
Right.
I had a student at the college where I taught last year that every time I told him something, he would get, literally his whole body, he would clench down, his face would come down, and he would just grit his teeth and brood. And I called him into my office one day and said, well, not that he would know, but individual, what happened today? Just flat out, I said, that was unacceptable.
Right.
So and there's then that willingness to be instructed that way too, that if you weren't, so that's that willingness. I can go off about that too. That's one of my my big soapboxes, is being willing. And then creative. Are you then willing into that creativity to take something as your own?
Right.
And not just be handed everything. Can you take it and expand it? If I hand you this lump of brown clay, do you just sit there with it and look at me? Or are you willing to at least stick your thumb in the center?
Right.
It may not be the best thing right away. It won't be.
Right.
But are you joyful? Are you willing? Are you creative? Are you aware? These are these things that to me speak of a healthy inside.
Right.
That then translates into a healthy production.
Do you think some of that willingness, you talk about people closing down, do you think some of that comes from fear that, hey, this is my stuff, this is my music, this is me, and you're asking me to let go of some of those things?
Absolutely. There's a sense of pride and a sense of self in it that is hard to give up. I have had and still have to do that myself.
Yeah.
And also part of it comes from often a bad experience.
Right.
Once upon a time, someone that has been hurt by a teacher. I had a handful of students at Colorado State when I taught there a couple years ago that had a lot of them in my studio had come from abusive teachers in some way.
Right.
And so they were so shut down and so unwilling right away because they just said, this is going to be a repeat of what's already happened.
Yeah, I've had experiences that way myself.
Yeah.
And when you finally get a teacher that meets at your level, that understands that it's personal, that has that empathy, it completely changes the way you learn.
Yeah.
Which is fantastic. You've gone into some of these other points we wanted to talk about a bunch. This is, like I said at the beginning, this is such an expansive thing. But you had mentioned baseline and then different styles. And so I'd like you to kind of go into that. How do you train your voice to sing in different styles, but be healthy when you do it, be truthful in the style, which we had talked about, which I think is so important. And why is it important not to be a one-trick pony? If you could just kind of touch on that, some of that.
Well, there are a couple of different things that I think are important in that one of them is, unless you are, which there are people that are, so power to them, pristine and unique in one style,
Right.
you're not going to make a living or be an effective communicator if you only sing one thing. My teacher always said, do you want to eat steak for dinner or ramen?
Right.
Go practice. And being able to what we call cross-train between styles informs the other, because you get to know the things that are unique about the style that maybe is your favorite. In studying jazz, I learn what's more unique about a classical idiom. In studying classical, I learn what's more unique about a music theater idiom.
Right.
And so you become more aware of what maybe is your niche. Maybe that's the thing you do best, but by studying other styles, you can be a more truthful performer in the one that's your favorite.
Gotcha.
There's also, and it'll help you make money.
Right.
I mean, if we're getting down to it at the end of the day, if you're an artist that's really serious about it, at some point, you would like to get that paycheck.
Right.
And I've been paid from everything from Beach Boys to 15th century polyphony.
Right.
Because I am willing to try it and figure out what's unique about that style and plug myself into it. I have a healthy bass line sound. Then I can sing all sorts of operatic styles within that genre. I can sing jazz, I can sing music theater, and I'm not as good at those as I am at classical, for sure. But there are things that I'm really willing to explore and get better at. And then I sing in a couple of professional choral groups where I only use maybe 20%, 25% of my sound most of the time.
Right.
But it's because I figured out a way to do it truthfully and healthfully. But training between styles, not being a one-trick pony, allows better performance in everything. gets you paid,
Right.
and it then allows you to appreciate more, because if you're experiencing more culture between all those things, you know how to better connect with more humans.
As a performer, that's huge.
It's so huge. You can't go on a stage. No one wants to see you go on a stage in technique.
Right.
They want to go see you create something.
Right.
And anyways, that's one of my big.
Yeah. And they want to be drawn into it.
They do.
So
yeah.
if you're not being truthful with the
Truthful and
performance,
authentic. Yep.
Yeah.
And so you study the heck out of every style that you want to sing. Sometimes I do that really well. Sometimes I don't.
Right.
But that's how you end up doing it effectively.
Now, with your background, we talked about baseline. With your background, do you find that it's really difficult to pull off another style, especially if it's kind of, Beach Boys, you had mentioned? That's got to be a real challenge for an opera singer.
There are definitely things. There are sound expectations for certain things that seem counterintuitive or counter to the health that is inherently built into classical technique.
Right.
Some things you figure out, okay, what's health and what's just my preconceived notion of what's right. And so I did a repertory theater where we did 2 shows that summer, 6 performances a week of old, like 1930s backwoods Southern gospel.
Okay.
And then there was another show that we did that went everything from old gas station jingles during World War I
Nice.
or World War II rather, to Beach Boys. It was Route 66. It was from
Okay.
Chicago to LA that it was.
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
so
yeah.
I said, okay, what are things that I know, what do I know I need to feel in this? And what can I experiment with?
Right.
And if something's not right, you're not going to break.
Right.
You're not going to break. If you do it a few times and it's not right, figure something else out.
Yeah.
But it's the willingness. It is hard to transition sometimes, but there's that willingness of. There's sometimes that I sing that people go, "That was great. You're an opera singer," and sometimes they'll go, "That was great. You're an opera singer."
Right. Yeah.
And
Sure.
I could tell that.
Yeah.
So it can be difficult. But there's that willingness to try something different and be aware enough. Going back to that previous point, to being aware enough to trust what you know and experiment with what you don't.
Right. Yeah.
So, and I know that's a very open-ended answer, but that's how I've discovered my own, because my voice has only gotten bigger and darker and more as I've aged, but I'm actually singing more effectively in this one of the professional choral groups that I'm in. I listened to a recording of a rehearsal the other day and I went, I don't just stick out the whole time because I'm learning
Right.
what actually is healthy there.
Yeah.
And this other side of my voice is getting bigger, so you think I would be worse, but it actually is helping because I'm being more aware and more willing to experiment.
And you figure out the tricks.
Yeah.
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 How do you assess, talking about that, how do you assess both vocally and personally, and I guess this would apply as a teacher as well, but in a performance setting especially, not only what are you capable of, but what's appropriate for what you have to offer?
It comes with experimentation outside of those formal settings. I just did a show. I was a clinician, a guest voice clinician for an honor choir in Dallas in June, and I got asked to sing the gospel solo at the end of one of the pieces. And I was like, I've never done gospel. Okay, and so I knew kind of what I listened to some Southern gospel, listened to some black gospel, things that they do it better than I do.
Right.
So I'm going to listen to it and learn from that.
Right.
And so I took what I knew of that. Not extensively because I just haven't been around as much, but I learned what I could and I took what I knew of that. And I was asked to improv over the end. It wasn't even a written solo, it was improv.
Wow.
And so I thought, okay, I know what it feels like when something's too much or too high or too big, something like that. And I know then what'll fit. So I turned on just a couple of brain cells
Right.
to be aware of what I knew was an expanding but still safe boundary, and went for it because I had practiced goofy things outside.
Right.
So you practice those funny things and expanding your boundaries and go, oh, that was too far. I know that right now or for this or whatever, that's too much or that's not appropriate. And it comes from faithful rehearsal and faithful practice.
Well, and do you find that sometimes the singing in the shower, singing in the car stuff, you suddenly go, oh, yeah, I know that this is going to work for me. And other times you're like, why do I keep trying to do that? It doesn't
I've
work.
figured out a lot about my technique driving.
Yeah.
Because I'll sing something on the radio in the style that it's on the radio,
Right.
and then I'll sing it in sort of like Renaissance choral style, and then I'll sing it music theater style, and then I'll sing it full operatic. And so I'll go through and just experiment with these things and figure out, okay, in this style, that's too much. In this style, that's just right.
Right.
You know, it's sort of the Goldilocks of technique. You want to, you want to figure out which place is how those all fit.
Yeah.
So you discover, again, it goes back to faithful experimentation.
Yeah. We could go on and on about that and how the styles can cross over and all of that stuff. But then on the teaching side, you and I had talked about something I hadn't been aware of. And that is, what are the various niches of teaching? Are you a starter? Are you a finisher?
So you look at, there's multiple ways you can think about that. The concepts, with vocabulary, came from my doctoral mentor. She does everything that I know and do well. A lot of it came from what I was taught by her. So starters are people who, okay, this voice is either damaged or severely out of shape or really green, whatever that is. So you start someone, and there are people that are fabulous establishers of technique.
Okay.
They do a great job setting foundations for students that are broken or really inexperienced or really out of shape, whatever that happens to be. But they don't have a really expansive, extensive knowledge maybe of more advanced concepts. And it's not that they're poor teachers. I don't mean that at all. But it's where their strengths lie is, I'm going to take this broken voice, or I'm going to take this really new voice and just get really good habits in them so that they're singing healthfully and can go on later.
Right.
Then I'll talk about the mid-range after, because that's the hardest one. Finishers are people who have an ear for the really small nuances of technique, of style, of sound expectation, of artistry, that can listen to someone who's been singing for 15 years and has a master's degree, has been singing, and go, back on page 3, measure 42, that vowel was just slightly unmatched in its resonance to the rest of the, can you tweak that one?
Are they more of a performance type teacher?
Normally, yes. You get those people who are performance coaches or who have had really extensive careers.
Right.
And that are just used to listening to high-level music making a lot. So you got those two, but then the mid-range is the hardest one, I think. And that's the one where I haven't had as much experience because I'm young, I'm 30, and I've only been teaching, for, 7 years. Okay. And I've not been in any one place long enough to take somebody from a starter through the mid to be able to kind of get them on to a finisher.
Right.
I've coached people and taught people that already have. I have a student right now. I have one who's a senior in college who's taken some time off school. I've got one that graduated college, and I have one that just got his master's. Those are people that I'm finishing. Those are people that I'm retweaking some things, maybe reestablishing some things, but I've done enough singing and enough listening to things that I know sound expectations and healthy singing at that level, but I just don't get that much because they're my age. You know, this one guy's only like 2 years younger than I am. So that finisher does the sort of performance ready. The starters get people. Then the mid-range is consistency within that starting foundation and getting people to, it's that teaching of awareness for the student. Right. Are those sort of mid-range. So there are people that do all of them well. There are people that are just finishers, that are just starters. There are people that do it only in certain genres.
So do you consider yourself a finisher and a starter?
What
do you think your not only your preference, but what do you think your expertise is in?
It depends on what setting I'm in. We have something called masterclass, masterclasses in voice. You have them in other arenas as well, but where you get somebody that has already memorized something, that's worked on it with their teacher, or whatever, and then you go in and you get to give them different choices to make in a performance setting. So that's sort of a finishing kind of thing, and I love that when it's in that setting. I love, though, getting a high school student that's really willing to work and starting them, because I have what I call my Hippocratic oath of voice, that at first I'm going to do no harm to their voice. At first I'm going to make it healthy. And so I would say that my experience is mostly within starting, because that's young teachers teach starters and
Yeah.
our starters. and I have some experience doing finishing stuff because of my masterclass work. I just haven't had, the student that I've had the longest ever is 2 years because I've moved around so much.
Yeah.
And right now, the student I'll probably have the longest still, about 2 years. So it's just, I just don't have as much in the middle
Gotcha.
that I've been able to do.
So that brings me to being starter, finisher. You end up working with, I mean, you do it anyway, I suppose, but in this situation, you end up working with other teachers where you're taking from someone who either hasn't had a teacher or did have a teacher and maybe it didn't work out or they moved or whatever. And then you also get, I'm sure, students where you're like, okay, I've taught you everything I'm able to teach you at this level. Go see this person. So how does that work? How can you be a good colleague in that situation? And what do you do with bad situations?
I've had the opportunity to say, hey, I'm not as good at this thing or what have you. Go see so-and-so about this. I think we've got a good system here, but this area is something I just don't have as much experience or expertise in. So go see my colleague here. They could probably give you some information and then come back and tell me what they said so I can learn it.
Right.
You know, and you're always getting those tools, but I always want to be a good colleague to everybody. Always.
Yeah.
There are some teachers that you see the consistent product that they put out, and you go, I wouldn't want a student to endure, and not that they don't have anything good to say. And I want to be so open and humble and clear about that. But there are times when I go, well, yeah, you're in a tough spot because right now we've gotten to the end of where we can explore this, and I don't know who to go tell you to see because, and then I've gotten students from teachers that have been really either vocally or personally damaged by those teachers. Yeah. And you have to care well for that student and be a respectful colleague of that teacher. And it's hard to do that. So that's maybe one of the trickiest parts of it is that if you didn't have to worry about offending anybody or being offended yourself, get over yourself. That it would be an easier world to live in if we didn't have to deal with that in our teacher world. But the best thing you can do is always listen, always to a student that you're maybe passing off or a student that you're receiving from someone else is how much can I hear of you both vocally and personally before I make any judgment call.
Right. Do you find that you have learning and teaching experiences within your colleagues as well, where you maybe have someone who you can see they've got a weak spot, they're open, and you're able to fill that weak spot for them, or you see someone and you're like, I have no idea what you're talking about. I'd really like to absorb some of that.
I had a colleague when I taught at CSU. Both of the teaching colleagues I had were really tremendous. There was one that we had more of a similar teaching philosophy and mind about us, more similar, and there were things all the time that I'd ask, hey, I didn't do this the way that I think should have been effective. Can we talk about it? And then, the student would be having a problem with something and he'd ask me, what's going on here? Or I really see that you're doing this well with the student. Can we talk about that? So being willing, being open in that way. The other colleague I had there we just didn't have, she's really tremendous, really tremendous, but just not as much of a connection that way.
Right.
And so it was more hands-off and that was fine. That was fine.
And you figure that out as you go, I suppose.
Totally, yeah. And so you have to, again, be empathetic and read people, not just in your studio, but your colleagues as well. Yeah. How do I interact with some people you can come up to and, terrible.
Right.
Or, what are you doing? And that's fine. And other people you would take that to their grave.
Right. Yeah. So now, do you consider yourself more a performer or a teacher? And then, no matter which the answer is, how do you balance that with your everyday life? You've got a little girl, you've got a job, you've got all this stuff going on, and plus I'm sure you've got a list of things you would like to do with your life. So how do you make all that work?
For me, so right now, I will go on the air as admitting that I'm not in fighting shape, both because of some health stuff that was going on, nothing terrible, just lots of stuff going on, and I also partly by choice went, okay, I don't have anything coming up in the very near future, so I can devote some more time to different things. So you have to prioritize. When I'm getting ready for something, when I know there's a gig on the horizon, I know how much time it's going to take me to get there. So I get myself in shape, and I work, I have 2 15-minute breaks during the day, an hour lunch, and I'll take those 15-minute breaks and go in the stairwell and practice. When I've got something coming up, I make the time.
Right.
There's no excuse.
Yeah.
So you figure out how to balance that in different seasons. And I would consider myself, right now I'm doing more teaching than performing because it's paying some nice bills for
Right,
me. And,
sure.
and I love performing, of course, but there was a season where I was doing a lot more performing. A couple of years ago, I was on the road all year, in and out, doing gigs all over the country.
Mm-hmm.
So it depends on the season. And I would say that they give me different kinds of joy.
Right.
Getting on stage and figuring something out and collaborating with someone on a stage in a performance setting is a totally different. There's a different input that gives than figuring something out with someone in the studio.
Right.
And so, I would say equal, and they balance depending on the season.
Yeah.
And right now I'm singing with it's Anima Chamber Ensemble, little plug for them here
good.
in Denver, and that's a different kind of vocal production that I'm used to, and so I'm working on that right now, and I'm also teaching 10 students.
Right.
And so I balance it that way, but then with life, I mean it is hard. I'm on the road between 60 and 70 hours a week, working and teaching, and so it's a lot. And so it's what is useful to get the job done and pay the bills and do these things, and when do I need to rest? You have to listen to yourself.
Yeah.
Again, it's being aware. It just goes back to that balancing singing and teaching, and then singing and teaching with other activities if that's not your full-time job, and it has been for me for the last several years. And so it wasn't as much of an issue. It was, well, this is my job. But now it's, okay, what do I do with this? Well, how do I pay the bills? How do I feed myself internally with these pursuits? And I have to listen. When do I just need to go to bed?
Right. Right. Well, and if you've got, how old is your daughter?
6 months old.
So that's got to be a huge priority.
Yeah.
And so when do you turn off, okay, I'm not performing or teaching,
Yep.
now it's family time?
Well, and that's like, I will put my phone down, or I'll put things literally just out of sight, and the time that I get to spend with her is that time.
Yeah.
And there's nothing else going on. The only thing that I do is take pictures of us on my phone.
Right.
That's the most.
Right.
But it's nope. I am invested right here, right now. I do the same thing with time with my family, time with my friends. You make conscious decisions to be invested where you are, and if that's in practicing, if that's in performing, if that's in teaching, if that's in family, if that's in your job, you make the decision to be invested where that is. And then if you make that a habit, things don't seem so overwhelming.
Sure.
Because you're only doing one thing at a time,
Right.
and you're not thinking about
Yeah.
the 8,000 other things you have going on.
Right.
So if that's again a very large question with lots of possible avenues,
Yeah.
and I don't always do that well.
Sure, sure.
I've got stuff on my mind
The
all the
human
time,
element.
but yeah, exactly. we cannot a computer that can just you can say plug that in and it just goes. But that's how I make myself. That's how I stay joyful in a lot of ways. Is I'm just going to be where I am.
Yeah.
Wherever that
Speaking
is.
of where you are you looking to take on more students? What's your future, and where are you at right now? What are you looking to do?
So right now I've got some. I said I have 10 students. So I've got, the week is pretty full. My weeknights I teach are booked up. And I've got some Saturdays that I'm teaching right now, but I've got, if somebody was interested, I've got some availability for students to take right now. Maybe another 2 spots that I could do on some Saturday business.
So you're pretty full.
But I'm and which is
it's a good problem to have.
yeah, a terrible blessing.
Do you, when you take students, and we'll close this out, but when you take students, do you have a preference to experience and knowledge when they come in? Do you tend towards wanting students that already have a base, or does it make any difference? Or
the ideal for me is someone who either has an unbelievable ear and can learn by rote, or somebody who reads music.
Okay.
You don't have to be a collegiate level sight reader to come into my studio, but are you working on it? And if you don't, are you working on it? If that's not what are you willing to receive the honesty that, hey, your voice is really nice, and you're not going to get very far wanting to do this. You're not going to be able to learn very quickly based on your skill set right now. So I always tell people I'd rather take a golden brain than a golden voice.
Right.
That's always and so are you open? Are you willing to? So I would receive students at any level. I teach, my youngest student is 15.
Okay.
15, and my oldest is 30, I think, right now. And so I've got a whole gamut there. And I've taught from like 12 to 60 before too.
Yeah.
I've had various, and they're all different. So it's not an age or an experience level that I'm looking for. It's an attitude, and it's a posture.
Gotcha. Sure.
And so I have a little bit of availability that I'd love to keep, and I learn from those students too. So I love to keep learning from that, and just know that are you be aware of yourself, and are you willing to go into it with openness.
Right. Cody, this has been amazing. We could go on, and there's so much stuff, there's so many things that people can learn from this. I've had heavy metal bands in, jazz artists in, other teachers in, and so many things to talk about that are so beneficial to everybody. So hopefully I can convince you to come back and dive into this some more. This was fun.
Yeah.
But thanks so much for coming down.
Well, thanks for having me. It was great.
This was cool.
Yeah.
And tons of information. And as we're talking, I'm coming up with more questions.
Yeah.
So very cool. Yeah. Thank you so much again.
You're welcome.
Folks, stick around. We're going to have his contact information up. And, definitely comment. Get some feedback for us on this, because I'd love to know what the audience is getting out of this and what you would like to know, so we can have him back on and drill him with some specific questions. Again, like, share, subscribe, support these local artists, support these teachers, performers, the whole thing. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this. Thanks for watching Futurartist Records Presents.